What if Ace survived Marineford? Marineford was supposed to end with Ace's death. Akainu's magma fist drives in, and for one instant, the whole war seems to freeze around that single, fatal blow. But this time, it doesn't land clean through his heart. Marco and Vista get there just in time, their hockey-clad strikes knocking the attack off its true path. Not enough to stop it, just enough to change the outcome. The magma tears across Ace's side instead of ending him outright. It's still brutal. It's still horrifying. Ace is burned, cracked open, and blasted back by the force of the impact. Luffy sees it happen and breaks apart on the spot, because from where he's standing, it looks exactly like the end. But then Ace coughs. He's alive, and that single breath changes the entire shape of the war. The Marines lose the clean execution they wanted. The pirates realize their impossible rescue isn't over. Akainu realizes too late that the bloodline he was meant to erase is still breathing. Marineford is no longer a victory parade for the government or a martyr's grave for the Whitebeard Pirates. It becomes a disaster. Luffy reaches Ace in a state of total collapse. He can barely think, barely move, barely process the fact that his brother is still in front of him. Ace is conscious only in fragments, and even those fragments are full of pain. But even through that pain, his first expression isn't relief. He looks at Luffy, at the blood, at the battlefield, and it hits him all at once that this was never only his burden. Luffy came here for him, Whitebeard came here for him. So many people are falling because Ace was too stubborn to let the world decide his life for him. Surviving should feel like a miracle, but to Ace, it feels like being handed a debt he may never be able to repay. Whitebeard sees everything at once. Ace is alive, but barely. Luffy is shattered. Akainu is already moving to finish what he started. In the original timeline, Whitebeard's attention centers on getting revenge and making sure his son's death means something. Here, the calculus changes. Ace is still in the world, so Whitebeard makes the harder choice. He commits to a full retreat, but he does it with one purpose only. That decision doesn't make him soft. It makes him deadlier. The old man turns Marineford into a living earthquake, buying time with the last of his strength. Marco becomes the wall between the boys and Akainu. Jinbei drags Luffy when Luffy can't move on his own. The remaining commanders and allied crews close ranks around the two brothers like a final shield. Whitebeard stays behind, not because he has to, because he chooses to. He dies on Marineford either way. Blackbeard still comes for his power. The Marines still tear into the battlefield. The era of Whitebeard still ends in blood. But now Whitebeard dies knowing one truth that changes everything. And that makes his sacrifice hurt in a different way. Because Ace has to look at the man who gave him a home and understand that he's leaving Marineford with the proof that Whitebeard's love was strong enough to rewrite fate. Ace's survival should be a victory, but for the Whitebeard Pirates, it's complicated. Because Ace doesn't just survive with scars, he survives with guilt. He remembers every second of Marineford, the taunts, the chains, the charge into death, the moment his pride nearly buried everyone with him. He remembers Whitebeard's body shielding him from the full consequence of his own existence. He remembers Luffy screaming for him, and he remembers that once again, other people paid the price for Ace trying to prove he had a right to live. So, when the remnants of Whitebeard's crew regroup, Ace refuses to step into the obvious role. He doesn't want to be the next Whitebeard. That title belongs to Pops, and Ace understands that trying to wear it like a crown would cheapen what Whitebeard really gave him. Instead, Ace becomes something messier and harder to define. He becomes the surviving flame. He works alongside Marco rather than replacing him. Marco keeps the remnants organized. Ace becomes the face the world recognizes, the man who can move between crews, islands, and conflicts without pretending the old era is still intact. He isn't a new emperor in the neat official sense. He's a living contradiction. And because he's alive, he can't escape the question that follows him everywhere. Why did I survive when Whitebeard didn't? Luffy still breaks after Marineford. That doesn't change. What changes is what he has to live with after waking up. He isn't mourning Ace's death. He's surviving the terror of almost losing him. That makes the trauma different, but not lighter. Maybe worse, because Ace is alive and still within reach. And that means Luffy has to live with the knowledge that his weakness nearly got his brother killed. When Jinbei forces the truth onto him, Luffy still understands exactly how much he fell short. He still realizes that his current strength was nowhere near enough for the world he wants to conquer. But now that pain has a direction. He doesn't train on Rosukaina just to avoid grief. He trains because Ace is out there, wounded, hunted, and carrying the weight of a world that'd love to finish the job. Luffy wants to be strong enough that if that happens again, he won't be helpless. So his time with Rayleigh hits harder. Every hockey lesson is tied to Marineford. Every collapse is tied to Ace's burned side. Every step forward is a promise. He won't let that moment happen again. He still wants to become Pirate King. Now he also wants the strength to stand beside his brother and actually survive the sea they're walking into. Ace has always had a problem with identity. For most of his life, he believed he shouldn't exist. Then Whitebeard gave him a home, and Ace finally had a place where being alive felt acceptable. Marineford shatters that certainty by making his bloodline public in front of the entire world. He's no longer just Whitebeard's son. He's also Roger's son, and he can't run from that anymore. In the original timeline, death freezes that question forever. Here, survival forces Ace to answer it. He doesn't become obsessed with proving Roger's legacy. He doesn't suddenly embrace the Pirate King's name as if it solves anything. Instead, he starts accepting that he's both things at once. Roger's blood gave him a place in history. Whitebeard's love gave him a place in the world. Ace is forced to live with both, and that gives him a new kind of purpose. He stops asking whether he deserves to exist. He starts asking what he should do now that he still does. That's the real turning point for him. Blackbeard still gets Whitebeard's power. That doesn't change the threat level. It increases it. In canon, Teach rises into the vacuum left by Whitebeard's death and the shock of Ace's loss. Here, he still rises, but now there is a living symbol standing in direct opposition to him. Ace isn't just a survivor. He's Whitebeard's unfinished legacy. He's the one man who can publicly remind the world that Teach's victory wasn't complete. That makes Ace a target. Teach knows what he means. He also knows that Ace is one of the few people alive who understands how dangerous he really is. Ace already failed to stop him once. That failure sticks with him, and unlike the original timeline, he has no death to hide behind. He has to live with that mistake and do something about it. So Ace doesn't charge Blackbeard alone. That's important. Marineford changes him just enough to make him smarter. He starts hunting information with Marco and the remnants. He tracks Teach's moves. He helps protect Whitebeard-aligned territories. He takes smaller fights, ugly fights, the kind that don't make legends, but do keep people alive. And in those clashes, he sees what Blackbeard's future looks like. Cruelty without loyalty. Power without restraint. A sea where people are stripped, used, and discarded. Teach can't ignore Ace, because Ace is the one surviving witness who can prove the darkness underneath his rise. That turns their conflict from a future rivalry into an active manhunt. Ace surviving Marineford creates a political disaster. The government wanted a clean symbol. They wanted a public execution that had confirmed their authority and crushed the morale of the pirate world. Instead, the world saw a failure. They saw a nearly dead Ace dragged away instead of killed. That matters, because now every Marine bulletin, every wanted poster, every Navy report has to work harder to contain the damage. His bounty rises, his name becomes more dangerous, not because his power suddenly becomes godlike overnight, but because his existence exposes a lie the world was supposed to accept. And that makes him a problem for more than just the Marines. Pirates start gathering around him. Some want to fight beside him. Some want to test themselves against him. Some see him as the last visible piece of Whitebeard's age and try to claim some of that legacy by proximity. Ace turns away a lot of them. He's not trying to build a fake empire. He's trying to keep the sea from swallowing everything his father gave him. That distinction matters, because it keeps him from becoming a simple replacement for Whitebeard. He isn't carrying a throne, he's carrying a wound. Luffy's growth still happens in the same broad structure. Rayleigh still trains him. The 2-year gap still matters. The Straw Hats still become stronger in the time it takes for the world to shift. In the original story, his pain is sharpened by loss. Here, his pain is sharpened by proximity. He knows exactly what Ace looks like after nearly dying. He knows exactly what weakness costs. So every bit of training becomes personal. He isn't just preparing to enter the new world. He's preparing to return to a brother who survived the impossible and is still fighting alone. That makes him more impatient, more stubborn, and more focused. He still has his usual chaos, but now it has an edge to it. When he finally sails again, he isn't chasing a memory. He's racing to catch up with a living fire. Sabo's story also shifts in a major way. Marineford no longer ends with Ace's death. It ends with Ace surviving a war the entire world watched unfold. That means Sabo doesn't come to the same emotional conclusion he did in canon. He doesn't have to grieve a dead brother. He has to find a living one. That changes his urgency. It changes the way he approaches the Revolutionary Army. It changes the way he looks at the world. Ace becomes a moving target in a bigger political storm, and Sabo wants answers. He wants contact. He wants proof that the brothers' childhood promise still means something in a world that keeps trying to split them apart. So when the time finally comes for those paths to cross again, it's not a reunion built around mourning. It's a reunion built around survival. That's a very different kind of emotion. This is the biggest world consequence of Ace surviving Marineford. The new world doesn't settle into a clean new order. It destabilizes. Whitebeard dies, so the vacuum is still there. But Ace existing means that vacuum never fully seals. There is no neat transfer of history from one emperor to the next. There is only a wounded force still moving through the sea, refusing to disappear. Marco holds territory in some places. Ace inspires loyalty in others. Some allies rally behind the remnants. Some break away. Some opportunists come hunting. That makes the post-Marineford world more volatile, not less. Big Mom watches carefully. Kaido watches with interest. Shanks knows exactly how much one surviving life can alter an age. And Blackbeard gets even more dangerous, because now he has to move faster, before Ace and the others can organize against him. And that matters, because in One Piece, unpredictability is usually where the real history gets made. Ace doesn't become a quiet guardian. He doesn't settle down. He doesn't vanish into the background. He also doesn't take on Whitebeard's old role in a way that feels fake or forced. Instead, he becomes a bridge between eras. He carries Roger's blood, Whitebeard's love, and Marineford's scars. He's old legacy and new survival in one body. That makes him important in ways he never would have been if he had died. He helps protect people Whitebeard once protected. He clashes with Blackbeard's expansion. He crosses paths with Luffy again. He eventually reconnects with Sabo. And every one of those meetings becomes more loaded because Ace is alive to stand in the middle of them. He's no longer the brother who died to inspire the rest. He's the brother who lived and now has to figure out what that living means. That's the core of the timeline change. If Ace survives Marineford, the world doesn't become kinder. It becomes more unstable. Luffy grows stronger under the pressure of almost losing him. Ace becomes a more thoughtful, more burdened version of himself, forced to live with both his lineage and his survival. Blackbeard becomes an even greater threat because his victory is incomplete. The Marines are embarrassed and more aggressive. The revolutionaries gain another point of friction in the great conflict to come. And the new world turns into a much messier battlefield, because one of the sea's biggest symbols of the old age is still moving, still burning, and still refusing to disappear. That's what makes this timeline so compelling. Ace surviving doesn't save the world. It keeps the wound open. It keeps the fire alive. It makes the future harder to control. And that means when the final war eventually comes, it won't just be about who inherited the will of the Pirate King or who claimed the title of Emperor. It'll be about what kind of world can survive when the dead refuse to stay buried. So if Ace lived through Marineford, what would you want his next role to be? Whitebeard's surviving flame? A wandering protector? Or the kind of pirate who changes the whole balance of the sea?